Lloyd Mance's Insider Football is back for another week. So excited to be with everyone here on 1029 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. Incredible week around the National Football League. I can't even believe it. We are finishing up week 12 this evening. Uh, Good game coming up. You have the Chicago Bears against the Minnesota Vikings in a few minutes. And I'll go with my initial gut reaction just to get it out there. I think you're going to see the Minnesota Vikings continue their march to the improbable comeback from the Kirk Cousins injury and that tough start that they had to continue towards their playoff push. We know that the Vikings are on a winning streak, and well, that was snapped last week, but they won probably 4 of their last 5 games, and I'm going to go with them this evening. I think Josh Dobbs will have a good game. I don't think Richard Jefferson is going to play, but they're probably not going to need him. Maybe they can get Madison going. The defense led by Daniel Hunter has really been getting a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And unfortunately, Justin Fields, that's kind of his calling card. He will make some spectacular plays in terms of running the football outside of the pocket, passes, and getting the ball down the field to DJ Moore. But I just think he'll end up making a mistake based on the pressure that the Vikings can dial up. And Brian Flores, their defensive coordinator, the former head coach of the Miami Dolphins, doing a great job with that unit. And they're really helping out their head coach, Kevin O'Connell, in a situation where everybody thought that their season was over. So that is what I'll go with in terms of the game on Monday night. I'm going to bring Ryan Neff in a minute. And what are we going to talk about around the league? Well, there's a lot to cover. You had your Thanksgiving games, and we'll cover all 3 of those games. We'll talk about, who was a delicious turkey and who was a jive turkey coming out of those games. And then we had a special, well, if you want to call it special, a Black Friday game that was, it was a laugher. I'm not going to lie, I didn't watch most of it. I probably went out and bought a large screen TV and all the other goodies that the family wants rather than watch that, because we knew the Miami Dolphins were going to dominate the poor Jets, and that's what happens. And then in terms of Sunday's game, we're going to go heavy talking about the biggest game of the week. Ryan and I previewed it last week. The Philadelphia Eagles and the Buffalo Bills. What a game it was. It was overtime thriller. I was just talking to our producer, Angel, who's a big Eagles fan. I'm just surprised he still has a voice. It was that type of game, and his Eagles come out on top. And we'll talk about where the Eagles stand and everybody else and the playoff picture as it stands moving out of week 12 and going into week 13. So Ryan F., we're going to bring him in. He is part of the Martinez and Friends show on the Tony Bruno Network. They're on right before me. And Ryan, glad to have you for another evening. Exciting week of games. And your Chiefs got the win. They bounced back. I didn't count how many drops there were, but I'm sure you did. And overall, how are you feeling? Did you eat too much? And in terms of Thanksgiving, what is your favorite meal? Is it a side or is it the turkey? What was your favorite from Thanksgiving?
My favorite meal for Thanksgiving is always the stuffing. I did a apple fig cranberry chicken sausage stuffing this year, and it was delish, my friend.
Okay, that sounds like some good stuff. In my house, it's always the same. My kids, they love Mom's macaroni and cheese. There's something I'll give homage to our one friend, Suzanne. We call them Suzanne potatoes. They're really the most loaded mashed potatoes. Probably the high cholesterol on a plate thing that you can ever eat, but they're delicious. You have bacon, you have cheese in there. I mean, so we had that. We had all the sides, and We got to watch all the games. But let's start, Ryan, with there was big news today around the National Football League. I couldn't even believe this happened. I was like, I'm getting alerts around midday, and I was like, is this really true? You know, we talked about all the coaches on the hot seat. I think last week we kind of gave thumbs up, thumbs down to some of these guys, and we'll touch on some of them in a second. But Frank Reich was not one of those coaches we thought would be fired. And I think, quite frankly, I think he got in an argument. You know, I think he stepped on the wrong guy's toes, which is his owner. And his owner, David Tepper, is a very impatient man. A plug is pulled on Frank Reich in Carolina after 11 games. The team was 1-10. They're going to turn to special teams coordinator Chris Tabor. He'll be the interim head coach. They do have Jim Caldwell there, the former head coach of the Colts and the Lions, there to help. He's advising. And then also, this was interesting. They had Deuce Staley, the running backs coach, and the quarterbacks coach, Josh McCown. They also kicked them out the door. David Tepper, I'll just chime in on this. He bought the team in 2018, and Ryan, he was a former part owner of the Steelers. He wanted his opportunity to own a team. They pushed Richardson out down there. We all know about Richardson and his non-disclosure documents and all the legal problems he had down there, and the league kind of forced him out. But now they're bringing in this guy Tepper, and he's making Jimmy Haslam the head coach of the Browns. I mean, the owner of the Browns looked like a genius, and we've laughed at years at the Browns how they're firing coaches one after the other. You know, Hugh Jackson, Freddie Kitchens. I could go on and laughing stock of the league. And then now the Panthers seem to fall in that same pattern. You have Reich out the door, and Matt Rule, who they're also paying. They gave him a 7-year contract, and I think he only finished about 2 and some change of that contract. They're paying him. So now they got 2 unemployed coaches, and they just have a mess. Everybody's going to point to, obviously, Bryce Young. The young man, I don't think he's doing a horrible job. I watched a lot of that game with Tennessee, but he's learning on the job. You know, he's 9 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. But I just think it's just too quick, and he did not give him enough time. What are you thinking here?
Well, I've also seen reports out there from the media that Greg Olson might be interested in coaching this football team. So
how about that? That's crazy.
Yeah, don't know if that's true or not, but I've seen a couple of instances. Look, I said this to Martinez and company, Lloyd. I'll probably get pushed back on it, but David Tepper's an idiot. He really is. He's not that good of an owner. He really isn't. He's driven this franchise into the ground. People have to remember, Frank Reich wanted C.J. Stroud.
Yes.
Management wanted Bryce Young. This is a quarterback as a coach that knows talent at the quarterback position. So imagine what the narrative would be right now if they would have drafted C.J. Stroud instead of Bryce Young. And the thing of it is, Lloyd, with Bryce, who in the hell does they have around him? Miles Sanders is a bust, okay? Chuba Hubbard maybe show flashes, but what the receiving core, I mean, do they scare anybody? No.
You have Adam Thielen, who is at this stage in his career, he's catch it and fall down. You know, there's no explosiveness. They get rid of DJ Moore in that trade to the Chicago Bears. And let's not forget that if the draft was today, the Chicago Bears would have the number 1 overall pick, which is the Panthers pick, because they decided, as you said, Scott Fitterer, who's the general manager there, and David Tepper really pushed that they wanted Bryce Young. Now, we know Alabama quarterbacks, they're surrounded by so much talent. You can't really get a true picture of them. And the thing is with Bryce Young, he's kind of slight in his build. Yes, he had some good seasons there with Alabama, won a Heisman Trophy. But I clearly thought C.J. Stroud was the better quarterback. When you watched him at the Combine, the way the ball just explodes out of C.J. Stroud's hand, and he can drive the football down the field, which is the new NFL. Now, Bryce Young, I think he's going to be a nice, solid quarterback. But much like Tua, Mac Jones, if they don't have anybody around them, it's hard for them to be the guy driving the car. So as I always say, a young quarterback can be a coach's savior or a coach killer. And we're seeing this over and over again. When they're making the wrong decision, they're kind of turning on the head coach, and he may not survive a quarterback. So, we'll see how this comes along. I do agree with you that Tepper is not doing a good job, but hey, he's a billionaire. He owns a team. He can do what he wants.
Yep.
But this team is going to be downtrodden for a long time, and it just seems like they just have no plan. And when you're looking at a team that does not have a plan, it always backfires and blows up. And I use the example of the Cleveland Browns all those years, and they seem to finally have gotten it right with Stefanski and Barry, their general manager that they brought over from the Eagles. I mean, they seem to have a plan. Everybody's in lockstep moving forward. So, to put a bow on it, do we think Carolina can turn this around? Chris Tabor is their former he's their special teams coordinator. Do you think they can turn this around and win a couple games, or it's just going to get uglier and uglier? Right now, I'm thinking each week in my survivor pool, I'm going to pick the team that's playing the Carolina Panthers.
I mean, do I think they're going to turn it around? No. Nothing is going to shock me if they win a game or they go 1-16. So they just don't have the material there to turn it around. It's not a winning culture right now. Players are frustrated. Fans are frustrated. And again, I will call David Tepper Jerry Jones Jr. because he just makes wrong decisions, has to have the hand in the cookie jar everywhere. So no, do I see them turning it around? Hell no.
Yeah, and I'll maybe I don't, because Daniel Snyder had so much off the field crap too.
Right.
But he reminds me of him. He's a meddler. You know what I mean? And people that I've talked to, successful business, sports, whatever, they've always said, you know what, I empower somebody and I kind of let them do their job. Frank Reich is a stoic head coach, been around the league, very well respected. He was on the Eagles staff with Doug Peterson that won that Super Bowl in 2017. I covered him before, as he was on the Eagles staff, kind of working his way up. We all know the great stuff that he did for the Buffalo Bills as a backup, and going all the way back to Maryland, he was a great quarterback there. So he's been around the NFL a while. He's a fixture, and I'm hearing that Tepper leaves the locker room, he cusses them out. And then, they probably really got into it, behind closed doors. And he said, you know what, it's your team. If you want to fire me, go ahead. It's probably that type of situation. And he's still going to get paid. You never know about all this. So the lawyers are probably going to get involved. And maybe there'll have to be some kind of settlement. But once again, Tepper is paying money out to a coach that is not going to be on the field. And if that's his prerogative, go ahead,
Yep.
Look at Mark Davis. Mark Davis is paying several. He's playing John Gruden. He's playing Josh McDaniels now, and then they're going to have to find a head coach. Now, everybody's pointing to the hot offensive assistant out there, and probably later as the season ends and all these coaches are fired, I'm expecting probably about 7 or more to get fired, and we'll talk about that when the season ends. But Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator of the Lions, everybody, that's the hot new name out there. We'll see, and then we'll talk about the Thanksgiving games. We'll talk about the job he did or didn't do in his game. But kicking off, we talked about all the great fixings and eating that we all did on Thanksgiving, and football is family and tradition, and that's what Thanksgiving is all about. You have high school games and some college games, and then the pro games. They always play in two places, and it was 2 interesting games to start the slate. You had the Green Bay Packers. They're now 5-6. They were heavy underdogs in this game. They were 8.5-point underdog, the third largest since 1970, where a team was that heavy of an underdog, and they came out and they punched the Giants in the mouth. I'm sorry, not the Giants, punched the Lions in the mouth right away. You had Jordan Love go right up top when the game started, throwing the ball to Christian Watson, and 2 players that have been maligned much of this season, particularly the quarterback, Jordan Love, and Christian Watson, who really has not lived up to expectations. They made that big play down the field, and it was just all downhill from there for the Lions. And quite frankly, I think Dan Campbell they may have been looking past these guys, or it was a hangover from they had that great comeback against the Bears a week before, but they just could not turn it around. They get a touchdown late that makes the score look prettier, but it ends up 29-22. But it was a total domination by the Packers, and their defense is starting to get some teeth. Guys like Rashawn Gary doing a great job getting after the quarterback, and the Packers at 5-6, they're trying to get into the playoff hunt. They're trying to chase the Seattle Seahawks, who also lost this week. So, what did you see in this Packers dominating win over the Lions, a team that we were talking about? Oh, they may catch the Eagles if the Eagles stub their toe. The road could go through Detroit. I'm just not sure that's going to happen anymore.
Lions 3 turnovers, Green Bay none. Jared Goff might have been having Rams flashbacks. I don't know. But the last couple of weeks, he has regressed to doing dumb stuff. And again, I think I messaged you and said, I want to trust the Lions. I just can't because they do stuff like this.
Yes.
They have not looked good the last couple of weeks. And here's the thing about tonight's game. If the Vikings win, they're only like a game out of first. So who would have thought that beginning of the year? So the Lions better fix it because if they don't, Minnesota's coming.
Yeah, and you know what? Things change so quickly around the NFL, and we're like, oh, just when we think we know what we're talking about, it's like, no, it's a total curveball. All the games were on Thanksgiving were heavy favorites, and we're like, okay, we already know the narrative. These bigger teams are just going to beat up on these other guys, and it'll just be quick work, and then we'll all be eating our pie and ice cream and enjoying ourselves. But I take my hat off to LaFleur doing a great job with the Packers and kind of turning it around. They're on a 2-game winning streak. And they did it without their star running back, Aaron Jones, who was banged up with a knee injury. He did not play in this game. You saw Dillon running the ball with some effectiveness. And then in terms of Jordan Love, he did not turn the football over. And he wasn't just a caretaker in this game. He was driving the football down the field to all his receivers. And it was pretty impressive how he was playing. So we know the first couple weeks he was a dominant guy, and then he kind of fell off a cliff, and we're all like, all right, he's not the player. But I think we're going to need to let this play out for the entire season, and then we'll see how he steps forward in terms of his maturation process. But like you were saying, if the Vikings win this one, it's going to get a lot closer in this division. And when we look at Detroit, their upcoming schedule, they're at New Orleans, another team who we really don't know their identity, and they're they're up and down. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about their game in a second. They're at Chicago. That's a game they got to win. Denver, who is extremely hot right now, they won 5 in a row. At Minnesota, at Dallas, and in Minnesota. So that's an interesting end of the season stretch for them. Those last 4 games are going to be a land field, and it's looking more and more like the road in NFC is going to go through Philadelphia, where I am, and I know Angel loves that. And it's cold and sloppy out there, though, so both teams got to play in those conditions. But the Philadelphia Eagles will have their raucous crowd, and they probably should have that number 1 seed. But Detroit has got some work to do. The second game, and we talked about this, we knew it was going to happen. We knew they were going to be jumping around that kettle, the Salvation Army kettle, and everybody was going to be happy and high-fiving each other. And sure enough, the Dallas Cowboys blow the doors off the Washington Commanders 45-10. To be honest with you, it could have been a lot worse. I think they kind of took their foot off the gas. And then we had Deron Bland get that record-setting 5th pick six of the season, and you just see Washington further crumble into the abyss. You feel bad for Sam Howell. He's a young quarterback that's trying to get it done, but Dallas had constant pressure on him, and they were able to sack him 4 times in this game. In terms of the defense for Washington, they got rid of Sweat, they got rid of Young, and you can see they just don't have much teeth left there. And Dallas took total advantage of this. Pollard running downhill. CeeDee Lamb had a huge game, and Dak Prescott continues to be undefeated in the Jerry Dome. And Dallas is another team. They're pointing to that game against the Philadelphia Eagles, December 10th, and they really want to close the gap with them. So, what did you see in this game? And then also comment on after the game, we saw, I was like, oh, all right, maybe Ron Rivera, who's one of those coaches we gave the thumbs down to, we thought, all right, maybe it's him that they pull the trigger on and say, don't come back. Well, it's the defensive coordinator, Jack Del Rio. But I think that's a last-ditch effort, and then it's soon going to be Rivera, who they're going to be replacing too.
Yeah, I mean, Dak with the 4 touchdowns, no picks. The Cowboys didn't turn it over. Commanders didn't get close to Dak, no sacks. Like to see the Cowboys run a little bit more. They only had 18 rushes. I know they had 100 yards rushing collectively, but Tony Pollard only carried it 13 times. Yes, for 79 yards, but it's not, the Cowboys didn't have to do too much. Scored at will. Defense teed off. So, again, the narrative will be Cowboys are going to beat up on all these teams with the losing record and yada, yada, yada. I get it. The stats speak for themselves. But again, like you said, big game in Dallas against the Eagles. Eagles got the San Francisco 49ers coming up. So,
yeah,
we'll see where Dallas is to finish. There might be just a slight chance that they might sneak up for the division, but I highly doubt it. But yeah, I mean, the Cowboys keep playing like this, but they got to prove it against winning teams. So we'll see what happens.
They've been eating a lot of cupcakes, just like the Miami Dolphins. They're 2 teams that have beaten on these downtrodden teams. Yes, they're explosive, and we talk about all the weapons that they have, and you're seeing Brandon Cooks kindly in the game plan, and they're spreading the football around, and everybody's real happy. I was laughing. I was like, did they really need to do that with the turkey legs already in the Salvation Army kettle? And it was unbelievable. Just like, okay, and you see their fans, they're all jumping around and everything. It was just a front running environment, and you wonder, okay, is it really going to be the same way when they play a true contending team? And when we look at Dallas, is standing right now, they're in the 5th spot in terms of it. The playoffs started today. They have Seattle, who's kind of bouncing along. They lost again. They're 6-5. Then the game against Philadelphia. So there are 2 more home games for them. Then they have to go at Buffalo, which is another tough game. We've seen Buffalo play the Eagles very hard. At Miami, in a matchup of 2 teams that they love to beat up on the tomato cans. We'll see which one steps forward there. And then they have Detroit, and they finish at Washington. So down that stretch is going to be interesting because in their last 4 games, they have 3 road games. And we know they're undefeated at home, but they have trouble when they go on the road, particularly in bad weather environments. And when they're at Buffalo, that's going to be a tough situation. And at Washington, we'll see about the weather there. But, Dallas, everyone's happy. Jerry Jones seems to be, but it's not about the regular season anymore with Dak Prescott. They need to get it done in the playoffs because we've seen too many times where they're just dominant and then they get to the playoffs and maybe they win the first one, but they lose the second game, particularly to the Niners, who I think they're 0-3 against over the years in the playoffs. So good win for them. Interesting thing, Ryan, was Dolly Parton gets out there at halftime. And I have a son he's 18 years old. He goes, "Who's that hot cheerleader?" I was like, you know that's Dolly Parton. All right, she's like 77 years old, but she looked good in that uniform, and it was interesting. I was like, wow, okay. You know,
Like I said on my Tina's and Company, I said it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work that went into that. So
yeah. So got some help, definitely. But you take your hat off to her for getting out there, and she actually put on a better show than I don't know his name. The guy who really had
Jack
uh,
Harlow.
no setup, for at the Detroit halftime show.
Yeah.
Um, and it was just like, okay, Dolly won the day in terms of the halftime entertainment. Jerry always puts on a good show, but as we said, usually Thanksgiving everybody's happy in Dallas, and then there's that December swoon. It used to happen all the time where they kind of limp home. Now, the interesting thing is the Eagles they're 10-1, and no team has repeated in the NFC East. We talk about this all the time since 03-04 Philadelphia Eagles. Right now it's looking like it's trending in that direction. The last game on Thanksgiving that we are going to talk about on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football here on 102.9 The Game and a Broad Street South Network is the San Francisco 49ers are now 8-3. They were dominant over the Seattle Seahawks and fall to 6-5. The Seahawks are they're limping home. This is a 31-13 dominant victory, and you're seeing now that the Niners have come off that bye. They're healthy. They have a ton of weapons in terms of our offense, and then their defense as well can do. They have all pros at every level of their defense, and they can get after quarterbacks. Smith was never comfortable back there, and then in terms of the Niners' offense, Brock Purdy, when everything is clean in the pocket, he is on schedule and pinpoint. So we're going to preview that game between the Eagles here in Philadelphia in a few minutes. But what did you see in terms of the nightcap and the Thanksgiving games? And I think we're seeing now that the Niners are in the driver's seat in that NFC West.
Yeah, the Seahawks are hanging on by a thread. Geno Smith got sacked 6 times, I think. Christian McCaffrey went off. Deebo Samuel had a good game. Like you said, 49ers getting healthy. I think the Seahawks right now are a shell of what they were last year. Again, they're 6-5, but San Francisco getting healthy. The 3-game losing streak, they were not healthy. They didn't have all the pieces, and now they do, and they're getting healthy. And we'll see what they're made of this coming Sunday, though.
Yes, and I know everyone here in Philadelphia cannot wait. They're talking about all the comments this offseason Deebo Samuel was saying in terms of, the Eagles got lucky and they don't want to see us and all that type of talk. A lot of bulletin board material, and the Eagles have circled this date. We know it's a revenge game for the Niners coming back to Philadelphia because the NFC Championship game is over as soon as Hassan Riddick busted around the line and hit Brock Purdy in his arm, hurting his elbow, and that game was over. Yes, Josh Johnson came in, but they had no chance at that point. And the Eagles are feeling extremely confident going into this game. The way they've played, they beat the Chiefs that we talked about, and then the game of the week, we got to talk about it. I was on the edge of my seat because I knew it was a desperation bowl for the Buffalo Bills, but the Eagles stepped up to the challenge. But the only thing is, Ryan, once again, like we did last week when we were looking at the stat board, you're like, how did this time it's Buffalo, but how did Buffalo not win that game? And then you start talking about the mistakes and things that people are saying the Eagles are fortunate. You know what I mean? Some people are some are saying lucky. I'll say fortunate. There are situations that you're like, wow, they're getting it done, and it's getting done late in games. It was crazy because they're down 17-7, and the weather is terrible, and you're saying, okay, this is where they finally look like the team that lost to the Jets, and they're not going to pull the rabbit out of the hat this week. But the Philadelphia Eagles, to their credit, particularly Jalen Hurts. He is my game ball winner this week. He was just dominant in this one. He had 5 combined touchdowns. He willed his team to victory, and right now he's the MVP favorite, and all the betting services did a great job there. But what were you seeing in terms of this game? I talked about a couple of things in those storylines, but what were you seeing in terms of, was it Eagles dominance, or did Josh Allen and the Bills just kind of spit the bit in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think they just left them off the hook. I mean, they had him down 17-7. Should have had a killer instinct. You knew Philadelphia was going to come back at some point. All the statistics pointed to Buffalo winning the football game. But again, more often than not in these types of games, it's whoever has the ball last. And hey, I didn't think Elliott was going to make the 59-yarder. You know what I mean? I thought the game was over. I would give him the game ball. You know what I mean? To send it in overtime. So the Bills did everything to not win they did everything to win the football game, but they didn't do everything to win the football game.
Yes. And the Bills are now 6-6. That you could tell they were fighting hard and trying to get it done, particularly Josh Allen. He was stellar in this game in terms of, he's 29-51, 339 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have a bad interception in the third quarter, I believe, where you were just like, it was a no, 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 yes, where his receiver was kind of bracketed and he tried to stick it in there and it ends up getting picked off. But then Allen was moving the chains and he scoring touchdowns, rushing the football. We've talked over and over again. You want to have somebody else help out. Yes, Cook had some good runs in this game, but it was Josh Allen, 9 rushes for 81 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then he was doing a great job in terms of moving the sticks and first down. So Cook had a huge drop in this game early, and you're just like, oh boy, he's on a wheel route. He's wide open. The ball's right there, and he drops it, and you're like, everybody that's against the Eagles, and people tend to not like them around the country. It's always Philly against the world. They said, oh, their luck's run out. Once again, it was almost like MBS. It reminded me of that situation. Cook had it, and then he drops it, and then the two bigger plays were Jalen Carter blocked the field goal, and then you had Bass. Bass did not inspire confidence in terms of the Bills. He had a bad miss as well. He goes 1 for 3 on his kicks, and the Bills are a team. They may not make the playoffs, and it was almost like, Ryan, there was one play, and that stuck out for me in terms of the Bills and how they're kind of waving the white flag and saying, Sean McDermott error, you may have to start questioning it. After the Eagles kicked their field goal to tie the score 34-34, there's 20 seconds on a clock. McDermott had already wasted one timeout and tried to ice Elliott on that big field goal, and so that was wasted one. So, but there was 20 seconds, and they had one timeout. And Josh Allen, who has one of the biggest arms in the NFL, and we talked about also all the referees screwing everything up with these pass interference penalties. Sean McDermott says, "Nah, you know what? Kneel on the ball. We're going to overtime." And at that point, I said, "Oh, you know what? They're probably going to lose this game." What were you thinking at that point when he says with 20 seconds, "Nah, we're going to go to overtime and try to win this one"?
Well, the thing to me that was more disturbing is that when Elliott was lining up for the 59-yarder, all the Bills on the sideline, especially like Stephon Diggs, he was acting all celebratory. They weren't going to make. That was more disturbing to me than anything, because kind of saw where the Bills' heads were at. And you knew when the Bills kicked the field goal in overtime, you sort of thought to yourself, yeah, you're not winning tonight, because field goals are not going to cut it in overtime. So that's what I was thinking. When they went in overtime, I knew it was over.
Yeah, it reminded me back when I was a kid, and you probably remember this, like the Joker on the old Batman show would have the Batman and Robin tied up over a vat of sharks or something.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, they got him this time. But no, somehow Batman was getting out of it. And that's what happened with the Eagles, the same kind of thing. They found a way to win, and you tipped your cap to them, and they did a great job of that. But I just wonder how, Are they going to be able to keep doing this week in and week out? And this game coming up against the Niners is huge, but also as you point to them trying to get back to the Super Bowl, they have to clean some things up in terms of their team. They allowed 505 total yards in this game. They allowed 173 rushing yards. So that's just showing that Sean Desai, the Eagles defense coordinator, he has a lot of work to do because Buffalo also was 13 of 22 on third downs and 1 for 1 on fourth down. So this defense, you wonder, do they have enough? You can't get into these high late real type games each week. There's going to have to be a situation where this defense steps up. The Eagles defense is predicated on their defensive line. You have Fletcher Cox now who's battling a groin injury, and you wonder how that's going to affect this team. So what are you seeing in terms of the Eagles defense, and can they fix it before the real games start?
Well, I mean, there's been a couple times this season where teams have given the rest of the NFL a blueprint on to how to beat this defense. Obviously, they're stout against the run, but the Bills ran it collectively 40 times for 173 yards. So this defense can be run on, but it's going to take a mix. It's going to take a balance. And again, you know the Eagles are going to score points because they've got the material on that side of the football to score points. But again, you know, here comes San Francisco, McCaffrey, Samuel, Ayuk, Kittle. So teams are going to start to take notice now on what, you know, I guarantee you San Francisco will look at this game film to see what was successful and wasn't successful. But much unlike the Bills, San Francisco's defense is now healthy. They're physical, and this is going to be a great matchup, man.
It is, and hopefully we'll get better weather. You know, the KC Eagles game, it was a rain, muddy conditions, and Sunday was the same way with the Bills. Luckily, they overcame that and they were able to put up some good stats. And the key, obviously, for this game with San Francisco and the Eagles is Trent Williams.
Yep.
And that offensive line for the Niners, they got to protect Purdy. Purdy is, we know, everybody says the last player taking a draft. We know that he's not a guy he's not going to create it on his own. He needs to execute what Shanahan is seeing on the field. So they got to keep him clean. But Hassan Reddick, we talked about him wrecking the NFC Championship game last year. He's going to be coming forward. Brandon Graham seems to have found a fountain of youth. He had a big sack this week in the Bills game. And then the rookies, particularly Jalen Carter, has done an extremely nice job for them on the interior. So that's going to be a great matchup as well. Carter against their center and guard combination. So we'll get into that game in a minute and we'll pick it and everything. But when I look at this Eagles team, I'm going to say to a lot of Eagles fans and people out there, one of the young men I watched the game with, he kept saying, "You're haters." And I said, yeah, there are a lot of Eagles haters out there. But you know what? The Eagles don't care. The Eagles are 10-1. They're the number one team in the NFC, and you have to tip your cap to them until somebody beats them and say the Eagles are the clear favorite in the NFC East, obviously, which is a mess other than the Eagles and the Cowboys, but in the NFC East and then trending towards the conference because we just talked about the struggles of Detroit. So this game this week is going to be huge. Philadelphia, they're running through their gauntlet. So they have San Francisco, and then they're at Dallas, at Seattle, which does not look as tough as it used to be. And then the Eagles get a nice landing at the end. Giants, Arizona, Giants. So they may be able to sit some of their regulars and get healthy. But the key is to get that bye and then only have to play 2 games in your home stadium. So the Eagles are sitting in good shape in terms of that. Anything else with this big matchup a great game that finally we get a game that lives up to all the hype, the Bills and the Eagles?
Yeah, I mean it was back and forth, momentum shifts. Again, I thought the Bills shot themselves in the foot. This was their playoff game, as far as I was concerned. I do not think they're going to make the playoffs now. You got too many teams, Steelers, Browns, you got the Ravens, the Jags, the Texans are right there. Broncos are up and coming. To be honest with you, Lloyd, I don't see the Bills making the playoffs this year.
Yeah, and Ryan, they give the extension to Sean McDermott before the season, and the Pegulas that own this team, they have to be seeing the non-aggressiveness that this team is showing after so many years that they were dominant, and they lose in the championship game to the Chiefs, and everybody says, "Oh, we'll be back." The old Dr. J line, "We owe you one." Well, you know what? They may have to rebuild this team, and we know it all comes down to they've never run the ball effectively, and they're putting too much on Josh Allen's shoulders. So we'll see if the Bills are able to come back. Um, the Bills will run back down their schedule. They have their bye, which they greatly need to kind of regroup. They're 6-6, but then they have to go at KC, which we know that's a tough environment there. They have Dallas at the Chargers, New England, and then they finish the season at Miami. So I do agree with you that we probably will not see the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs. All right, the show's moving real quickly. Here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. I'm Lloyd Vance, and I'm joined with Ryan Neff. We're running through the games for Week 12, and then we're going to preview and look at the games for Week 13 a little bit. I don't have much to say about the number one, did they really need to have a Black Friday game? Let's start there. And then the product they gave us, the Miami Dolphins, who are now 8-3, and we talked about them eating up on cupcakes. They destroyed the New York Jets, who are limping home. The Aaron Rodgers list, New York Jets. He's not coming back, people. All right, the Jets are now 4-7. They lose 34-13, and you have to start wondering: is head coach Robert Saleh on the hot seat, and general manager Joe Douglas too? Woody Johnson, their owner, is definitely got to be seeing this, and that game was on national TV for everybody to see. Tim Boyle, the best thing I could say about him is he's not Zach Wilson. So what did you see in this debacle of a game that was on Friday?
I mean, Lloyd, New York, 10 rushes, 29 yards.
Oh.
You've got your backup in to start, and you're running the ball 10 times for 29 yards. The kid was sacked 7 times. It was just a debacle from the get-go. And here's the thing. I don't care if it's Tim Boyle, the actor Peter Boyle, and Nancy Wilson from Heart, Zach Wilson, it doesn't matter. They do not have the quarterback on this team to lead them to anything. So, but again, what kind of game plan is that you're running the ball 10 times for 29 yards? That's pathetic. There are high school teams that run it more than that, for God's sake. So it's just a mess there. Salah will probably be gone. I don't know who they're going to bring in, but it's just
it's ugly, and it's rinse and repeat because it's on national TV over and over again because the NFL wanted Aaron Rodgers in the big market, and there he is, and they put him in prime time over and over again. But we're stuck with these games. In terms of Aaron Rodgers, everybody keeps asking me, emailing, and texting, is he coming back? Is he coming back? I don't think he comes back for 4-17. He'll be turning 40 in a couple weeks. And why would a 40-year-old come back and try to do something unprecedented coming back off an Achilles injury? I think the best bet to see Aaron Rodgers again will be for him to come back with the Jets in probably a new regime next season. He's already signed. He signed a 2-year deal, so he is under contract for next season. I don't think he'll want to go out the way, limping off after 4 snaps. I think he'll want to come back next season and just see from there. Now, the key thing is all his Packers cronies that he brought with him, Billy Turner, Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard, Nathaniel Hackett at OC, do these other guys come back with him? So crazy situation with the New York Jets, and both New York teams are terrible, and the back pages are just, they're looking forward to the draft in September. They're already saying the Giants are pushing the wrong buttons by winning games and losing draft status. And then you have the Jets, who are just a laughing stock. And what an ugly performance. So, what were your thoughts on this one?
Again, Jets are packing it in. The thing that's disturbing to me about Miami, though, Lloyd, is Tua has not looked great over this last month. And he needs to sort of start getting back to the way he played the first 5 or 6 games of the season, because he threw 2 interceptions again. Now, of course, it's the Jets, so you knew they weren't going to lose the football game. But, they ran the ball 37 times for 167 yards. Waddle and Hill went off. But again, you want to get deep into the playoffs and you want to make a deep run. You cannot be throwing interceptions like Jalen Waddle has been the last month.
Yeah, and they look good on paper in terms of their stats and everything, but as you said, they're winning these games, and it's like a yeah, but type of thing. Like, yeah, you won a game, but there's no explosive plays down the field that we used to see before. Tua is kind of becoming a game manager. Mostert is running the ball with some effectiveness, but a chain has been injured. And this Miami team, when we look at the schedule, they're at Washington, they have Tennessee, the Jets, Dallas, at Baltimore, and Buffalo. So you're talking about maybe what, 2 teams that have a winning record there out of that group. So they're probably going to win a lot of games. And are they going to be that team that's like, okay, yeah, they're going to wait till the divisional round and kind of get bounced, even though they have that great stellar record, and they're probably going to be at home because that division is pretty much all wrapped up. But when I look at Miami, I'm not buying stock in them. So Miami has a lot of work to do, and good story with their comeback, but they're not. To me, they're not a true contender.
Right.
All right, moving down to slate. We'll move to Sunday. This game I'll touch on real quick. It's this division stinks. All right, and I won't make it guess it, but it's the NFC South. I mean, it's just terrible. You had the Atlanta Falcons, who are now 5-6. They beat the New Orleans Saints, who are probably one of the most inconsistent teams out there, who fall to 5-6, 24-15. So now the Atlanta Falcons at 5-6 due to tiebreakers. They are right now. They'd be the number 4 seed. My son was just saying this to me. He's like, I don't know why they have that system. They should just go by their record and not allow a bad divisional winner to host a game in a division round, but or the wild card round. That's what it's looking like right now. Atlanta Falcons, if they won an NFC South, would host a playoff game. What they did do one thing good. It was not Desmond Ritter, Heineke, Desmond Ritter. They're basically the same guy. They're both going to make mistakes, but they did get Bijan Robinson going in this game. He had 123 total yards in the game on 19 touches, and he did have 2 touchdowns. Arthur Smith finally wakes up and says, "Oh, I drafted a running back in the top 10, and he's using him." So, good win for the Falcons, and Robinson kind of breaking out. But when I look at them, they're another team we're saying, okay, they're probably one and done. But what are you seeing with the Falcons and anything on this game?
I have to apologize to Atlanta Falcons fans because I said Desmond Ritter was going to have a breakout year, and I was wrong on that one. I'll take ownership of that. Someone's got to win a division, Lloyd, and you know who Atlanta would play right now in the wild card round? That would be your Dallas Cowboys. They would not get San Francisco. That's probably what they're hoping for. Anybody in this division, they're not going anywhere. But somebody
and there it is. And you know what's going to happen if they play the playoffs, Ryan. They're going to go in. They'll take over the Mercedes-Benz Dome because we know Dallas is a national franchise and they have all these front-running fans all the place. And Dak will probably have a huge game and CeeDee Lamb and everybody be excited. And it'll make the betting lines interesting going into that next game. But to me, that's where Dallas will fatten up on another cupcake, and then we'll have to see if they're not the paper champions that I've been saying they are all season. But yeah, the Atlanta Falcons, a team, as you said, somebody's got to win this division. Last year it was the Bucs at 8-9. Hopefully the Falcons at least have a winning record in winning that division. But that's an ugly game that there's not much to talk about there. And then to talk about the Saints, Dennis Allen, they handed him that job to be the head coach after Sean Payton leaves, and he's just not the guy. He's supposed to be a defensive-minded coach. And then in terms of the offense, Derek Carr is not fitting with him. He's turning the football over. I almost think the best chance to win games would be put Taysom Hill back there, have him run the single wing, and then kind of hand the ball off to Bijan as needed, because Derek Carr is not looking good there. They lost Chris Olave after Olave had a huge first half.
Yeah, he did.
And then he gets a concussion, and then that team just kind of stalled after that.
Well, here's the thing. They're both 5-6. So it's not like New Orleans is like 3 games out of first place. So, and I just saw a stat, up to this point in the season, that the division with the worst record collective-wise of all time is the 2023 South Division in the NFC. Congratulations, my friends. Congratulations. But again, I just think Atlanta has a little bit more on their side of the football to maybe make a run, win the division. Do I think they're going to have a winning record when they win a division? Probably not. But Saints are going one way, and Atlanta's just doing enough.
And as we look at the Atlanta Falcons going forward, they're at the Jets, winnable game. They have Tampa Bay, huge divisional battle there, but they should win. They should have a chance to win that one. They're at Carolina, another chance to get a win. Indianapolis, who has a winning record, 6-5, at Chicago, and then it probably I know it's going to come down to this. It's going to be Week 18 at New Orleans in the NFL's loser leaves town match. Maybe they can get Mean Gene Okerlund to call it. You know what I mean? Because this reminds me, or maybe they'll make it a hair match where somebody has to get their head shaved and they have to leave town, because right now I think it's probably going to be a sloppy affair. But somebody's got to win that division, as we said, and that may be a pivotal game down the stretch. We'll talk about a couple more of these games before we jump to Week 13 here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. I'm Lloyd Vance, and I'm joined by Ryan Neff. We're going over the Week 12 action. This game you felt bad for him. We talked about this quarterback earlier, C.J. Stroud. He's already Rookie of the Year. They just hand him the award. And possibly he was in an MVP race, but DeMeco Ryans, it's 4th and 12. Rather than try to get a little closer or have Stroud go for it, he decides to try out there. Their kicker Amendola, who's a replacement kicker. Fairbairn has been hurt, and he hasn't been playing the last couple weeks. And Amendola hits a nice kick. He's never made a 50-yarder in his career, and it's going right down the middle, and then it doink right off the crossbar of all things. And it was I think it was a 54-yard attempt, and it was probably a 52, 53-yard kick.
Mm-hmm.
So tough loss for the Houston Texans, snaps their winning streak. But you do have to tip your cap to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are now, they're in the 3rd spot right now, but they're leading the AFC South. And finally, Trevor Lawrence made some explosive plays with his arm, driving the football down the field. He hit Ridley over and over again. Christian Kirk had a nice big play where he got pushed out the 1-yard line on a bomb. But you're seeing Jacksonville Jaguars really come along. And everybody's talking about the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen. You got to talk about the Jaguars, Josh Allen. He is just becoming a game wrecker for them defensively. He's getting quarterback pressures, hurries, and he's causing a lot of game-changing plays. So the Jaguars, huge win for them in Houston, divisional game. But I think it's still going to come down to the end with the Jaguars. What are you thinking when you watch this game?
The Texans need to stop relying on CJ so much, to be quite honest with you. I think I get it. He's a phenom. I get it. But Devin Singletary, 6 rushes, 18 yards. Damian Pierce, 5 rushes, 14 yards. CJ Stroud, 6 rushes, 47 yards, and a touchdown. You have to get to the next level. You have to have a consistent running game. 18 rushes, 91 yards, but that was bolstered by CJ Stroud's 47. And I think they rely on CJ a little bit too much. They've got to be able to rely. They've got a dual-headed running back. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they just Jags
and
are the Jags.
Offensive line too.
Yeah. I mean, the Jags are the Jags.
They can beat people up front.
And the Jaguars are just going to continue. They know their identity now. No bones about it. They're sitting at 8-3. So we'll see what happens with both teams. Houston's going to be right there at the end of the year. But again, you can't rely on CJ so much.
Yeah, they're putting on Slowick, who's their offensive coordinator. I think he definitely thinks after Stroud has been able to pull rabbit out of his hat so many times that this young man could do it over and over again. But they should spread the football around. They have a lot of weapons and a lot of emerging players with teams. So they're two fun teams. If the playoffs start today, Jaguars would be in the third slot. Houston, unfortunately, be the outside looking in as Indianapolis snuck in there. But there's a lot more games to be played. If we look at what's coming up on the horizon, Jacksonville, they host Cincinnati. They're at Cleveland, who we saw stub their toe, and with that young quarterback, speaking of young quarterbacks, DTR, they got problems there.
Yeah.
And then big game for Jacksonville. They're Baltimore. Then they're at Tampa Bay, Carolina. We talked about their mess earlier, and then they'll finish the season at Tennessee. So a lot of winnable games for Jacksonville. I think they're going to hold on and win that division. Houston. What a feel-good story would be if they're able to make wild card weekend, and that's what D'Amico Ryans is trying to do there. So they have a big game this week against Denver, and then they're at the Jets, at Tennessee. They host Cleveland, and then they have Tennessee, and then they finish at Indianapolis, which could be a playoff eliminator type of game. So two good young teams. It was fun to watch, and unfortunately, I had to end on a kick there like that. We'll go over one more game before we jump to week 13. I'll choose this one. I was on earlier with Rich Quinones on his show on Q, and he issued an apology to Russell Wilson. It was funny because he had been killing him and Sean Payton. He buried him after a couple weeks, and he said, Lloyd, I'm going to, on the air, he said, I'm sorry and all that. I said, maybe you should write him a letter, you know what I mean? Because, yeah, Russell Wilson was buried. This team was, I think they were 1-4 at a certain point, and now they've rattled off 5 straight victories. And you're seeing the Denver Broncos really start to have some teeth. They had a huge win over the Cleveland Browns. The Browns, they lose. Myles Garrett got a little beat up in this game. I talked about their young quarterback, DTR. He got knocked out with a concussion, and then it was all downhill for the Cleveland Browns. And I think the Browns may have trouble making the playoffs, but that's another. We could talk about that side of the point in a second. But when I look at the Denver Broncos, you're starting to see Russ cook in terms of he's running the football when he needs to. He's driving it down the field to Sutton. And they have a lot of good weapons on that Broncos team. And then their defense, everybody laughed at them when they got 70 hung on them. That defense is starting to get some teeth. And Vance Joseph is doing a great job with them. So what did you see in terms of the Broncos' 29-12 win over the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah, Cleveland turned it over 3 times. I think Denver turned it over once. But look, Denver, 39 rushes, 169 yards. And it was Javonte Williams, 18 carries, Samaje Perine, 7. They mixed in a couple others there. When you rush the ball 39 times for 169 yards and you control the clock, takes all the pressure off of Russ, and you turn it over to the defense, which is much improved. They're sitting at 6-5, and I said earlier, Martinez and company, nobody wants to play the Broncos right now. They're on a roll. They're playing fantastically. They know what their identity is now. I think they make a run and they make the playoffs.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because there's a playoff kind of eliminator this week at Houston, and then they're at the Chargers, who are really falling apart. I think Brandon Staley may be one of the next coaches out of here. And then they're at Denver in Week 15, which is an interesting interconference game between two teams that are contenders. Then they have New England. Then um, yeah, and then they have the Chargers again, and then they finish at the Raiders, who kind of have that interim coach and Pierce, and they're another inconsistent up down team. So I could see Denver winning a lot of games. And don't forget, you have a former Super Bowl winning head coach and quarterback here. They know how to get it done, and it was just a matter of cleaning things up. And as you said, nobody wants to see them at this point in the season. So Denver, definitely tip your cap to them, and we'll wrap a bow on Week 12 with that. But here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football, we definitely got to talk about Week 13, because as the season moves along, these weeks are getting bigger, and you're starting to see teams start make plans for the off season, and then you're seeing other ones step forward as true contenders and trying to claim these playoff spots. Week 13 is our last week, thank goodness, for buys. So, you fantasy football players, you have the Baltimore Ravens, who got a nice win in Week 12. Kind of struggled. Another nondescript game. They beat up the poor Chargers, and as I said, Staley, he's on borrowed time there. They beat the Chargers 20-12 on Sunday Night Football, but it was a boring game. So you don't have the Ravens. We talked about the Bills. They need a week off because that was just a tough performance against the Eagles and a tough one to lose. So they'll try to regroup and get back in the race at 6-6. You have the Bears, who are playing tonight. There's not much there. Eberflus is done. They're on a bye, and then you have the Raiders on a bye. They're inconsistent. They've already fired their coach. You have the Vikings. They're an interesting team. If they can get it done this evening, they'll be in the mix, and they'll get a week to kind of regroup. And then the poor Giants, who all their fans are mad because they're losing draft position. DeVito put another one in the trunk. He's won 2 weeks in a row. Ugly games. I mean, I feel bad for people who had to watch that one, Ryan. 10-7, they beat the poor Patriots, who are actually going to step away from Belichick. We know that's happening, but those are your teams that are on a break. The Thursday night game, the Seattle Seahawks have got to try to resuscitate their season. They're 6-5, but the game is in Dallas against a red-hot Cowboys team. The Cowboys, as we talked about, they're on a winning streak. They're coming off a Thanksgiving game where they were just dominant. And when I look at the Seattle team, Leonard Williams has kind of come over from the Giants, but we really have not heard his name. He's not playing really well. Jamal Adams has always struggled in coverage, and that trade is looking like a disaster where they brought him over. Too much draft capital there. Geno Smith is looking more and more like the guy who was playing for the New York Jets back in the day. So when I see this one, I think that Seattle comes in and they're the latest tomato can that Dallas kind of beats up on, and Dak puts up big stats because he's undefeated at home, and CeeDee Lamb has a big day. So I'd say go with Dallas in this one.
Yeah, it's just the Cowboys better watch out because sort of the Seahawks are hanging on by a thread playoff-wise. They're going to get their best shot just because it's Dallas. So Cowboys better watch out. You better watch out. I fully expect Dallas to win the football game now, yeah.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if Kenneth Walker plays in this game because he is the key for Seattle because if he's able to run and dictate the pace of the game, it takes a lot of pressure off of Geno Smith. But I expect Dallas to win that one. The next game that we'll kind of preview is you have the Detroit Lions. Thanksgiving was a stinker. They're now 8-3. If they want to have any chance of catching the Eagles, they got to win this game. They are down in New Orleans, a team who, as we said, is very inconsistent. But that Lions defense, when I look at them, Aaron Glenn, his unit is just not stopping anybody. Teams are able to move the football on them. Now, the thing is, Did the Saints miss Chris Olave, who's out with a concussion? They've already lost Michael Thomas. They lost Rashid Shaheed this week to an injury. So who's going to be catching the football? And then Alvin Kamara can only do so much. So I think the Lions win this one, but I think it's going to be a very close game.
Jared Goff doesn't turn it over, Lions win going away. Jared Goff plays like he did with the Rams, gonna be close. But I fully expect Dan Campbell will have the boys ready. I think Detroit wins the game.
Yeah, and it's a desperation game for them. They need it more. And as we said, the NFC South is terrible. The Saints could lose this game and still stay in the mix. The next game I kind of want to look at is the Denver Broncos will be traveling to Houston. This is a great matchup because you have, the old line versus the young line. You have Russell Wilson, whose team is on a roll. They won. They're on a 4-game winning streak. Actually, it's a 5-game win streak. They're in a 5-game winning streak. They're going to a Texans team that just lost that heartbreaker, and this is a playoff eliminator type of game. So I've been back and forth on this one. It all depends on Patrick Surtain in that defense. Can they get some turnovers? Can they make C.J. Stroud make some mistakes? He is not making a ton of mistakes, but the last couple weeks he has thrown some interceptions. So I'll go with Denver in this one in a very close game, but the Texans make it interesting.
Yeah, I just think the Broncos learned something this past weekend, running it, how many times did I say? I just think that the Texans up and coming, but I just think right now Denver's a little bit better. So I'm going to go with Denver.
Yeah, it's a step up in class from them. The Kansas City Chiefs, big game for them. They won in nondescript fashion. They beat the Raiders 31-17, but it was one of those games once again where it's like, okay, Mahomes is just doing what he needs to do, and they're beating up on the AFC West, which they always do. Their record's very stellar in their interdivision. But this is a chance for them to go on a road. I think Mahomes may have played in Green Bay only like one other time in his career, but this is a chance for him to go on a road in bad conditions outside and face a Packers team that's kind of red hot. They won 2 games in a row. And then you got Rashawn Gary and those guys, and they're going to try to get after Patrick Mahomes. Now, the key for the Chiefs is going to be, can they get Pacheco going and get that running game going? So huge game, Chiefs at the Packers. I will go with the Chiefs in another close game, but it's only because of Mahomes and Reed. I just think they know how to push the right buttons, and they want that home field advantage going to the playoffs.
Yeah, and the fact that, Aaron Jones is hurt. Packers really do not have a running game. I know it's right now they're calling for rain for the game. I think the Chiefs get the running game going this weekend with Pacheco, and they'll mix in everybody else. Close for about a half. I just think the Chiefs found something against the Raiders. I just think they pull away in the second half.
Yeah. And all right. And we'll get to this is the big one. It's the Fox national game. It's a 4:25 start. It's the San Francisco 49ers who are trying to catch the Philadelphia Eagles, get that number one spot in the NFC. This is a rematch from last year's NFC Championship game, a revenge situation. I talked about Deebo Samuel in his comments this offseason. That's kind of poked the bear of some of the guys on the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles, yes, some people will say they're fortunate. Some people will say the refs are helping them out, and there were some missed calls in the game against the Bills. But this team is 10-1. You have to tip your cap to Jalen Hurts, who is an MVP candidate. This is a prove-it type game. Been back and forth on this one. But when I look at these two defenses, we broke them down very thoroughly earlier. The Niners defense can get after people. And with Lane Johnson battling that groin injury, we're not sure he's going to play in this one. I think that you may have Bosa and Chase Young and the rest of those guys have a big game. Fred Warner. So I will go with the Niners ending the Eagles' 5-game winning streak. The Eagles, as I said, they've been stacking W's, doing a great job. But I think if they start slowing this one like they always do, it's going to be a tough situation. I'll go with the Niners and a very close win in Philadelphia.
Yeah, you know what? I'll make Angel Martinez very happy. until somebody knocks them off, especially at home. I think it'll be a close game, but I think the Eagles pull it out in the fourth quarter.
And it could very well happen because this team, as you know, they'd love to snatch victory away. And Jalen Hurts is 4-0 in games that Angel says, "You're damn right." He's, Jalen Hurts 4-0 in games where he's trailing by 10 points or more. Never gets too high, never gets too low. They're a resilient bunch. We'll see how it goes, but they cannot look past this team because the key guys that we said, Kittle and McCaffrey, challenging that inside of the field against Eagles linebackers and safeties is going to be huge in this game. But hopefully it'll be another thriller like we just saw where it comes down to the very end and everybody's on the edge of their seats. So another great week here on Lloyd Massey's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game and a Broad Street South Network. I appreciate Ryan jumping on. We got to cover a lot of ground tonight, which was great. We covered all the games and Thanksgiving games and had a lot of fun. Angel on the ones and twos. I think he doesn't have his voice because he's still screaming about his big Eagles victory in the rain here in Philadelphia. And they put away the Bills and Jalen Hurts looking like the MVP. Big win for them. So thank you to Angel for producing the show once again. So we'll be back next week on Lloyd Massey's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game. And we will hopefully be able to talk about another thrilling game. This one we're looking forward to, the Niners versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Talk to you later.